There's a decision. You know which one. You didn't have to think about it. It arrived the moment I said the word, because it's been sitting in the same place for about a year now. The job, the move, the conversation you'd have to start and then couldn't stop. The thing you'd have to end, and you don't call it avoiding. Nobody does. You call it waiting for the right time, or getting your ducks in a row, or being sensible about it. Which is fair enough, except that you were being sensible about it last October as well. Here's what almost everybody does with a decision like this, and why all three feel like progress, and are the same standing still. Then I'll tell you about a Roman who was told he'd been condemned by the Senate and asked 2 questions and went to dinner. 3 doors. The first is more information. One more conversation with somebody who's done it. Another version of the spreadsheet. A weekend of reading about it. Research is the most respectable way to not move, because it's indistinguishable from diligence, right up until you notice you cross the point where more data changes the answer about 8 months ago. Everything since has been a search for reassurance dressed as a search for facts, and it will never arrive because no amount of information tells you what you're willing to risk. The second door is the condition. After the bonus. After Christmas. When this project lands, you've hitched the decision to an event which feels responsible and is the cleverest of the 3 because the event moves. Here's the tell, and you'll know within a second whether it applies to you. The condition has already been met once. The bonus came. Christmas happened. The project landed. And a new condition appeared so smoothly that you never noticed the old one being replaced. The third door is the half move, and it's the worst because it looks the most like action. You update the CV and don't send it. You have the conversation brilliantly in the shower. You look at the listings on a Sunday night and close the laptop. Every one of those releases just enough pressure that you can go into Monday without doing anything. That's what it's for. The half move isn't a step toward the decision. It's the valve that lets you keep not making it indefinitely without ever feeling like a coward. Here's the thread tying all 3 together. Every one of them is a way of not finding out. That's the whole mechanism. As long as you don't move, the good version is still available. The moment you move, you get a result. And the result might be worse than the one you've been carrying around. And carrying it around isn't free. That's the part nobody prices. You have paid for this decision every Sunday evening for a year. In the reign of Nero, a Roman senator called Agrippinus was put on trial. Epictetus tells the story to his students. Word comes to Agrippinus that his case is being heard in the Senate at that moment. And he says, good luck to it. But it's the 5th hour, and the 5th hour is when I exercise and take a cold bath. So he goes and exercises and takes his bath. While he's there, a man arrives with the outcome. You have been condemned. And Agrippinus asks, to exile or to death? To exile. And my property? It has not been taken. Then, he says, let us go to Aricia and dine. Now that reads like a man being very cool about something terrible, and that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is how fast it went. 2 questions. He had a decision tree already built, and the verdict fell straight through it and came out the other side as a dinner plan. Epictetus tells another story about the same man that explains where that came from. Nero was staging a festival, and everyone was required to perform in it, a genuine humiliation for a senator, and refusing was dangerous. A man named Florus was agonizing over what to do and asked Agrippinus for advice. Agrippinus told him to go. Florus said, so why aren't you going? And Agrippinus said, because I don't even deliberate about it. That's the line. Not because I'm braver than you. Because the question isn't open. He'd settled what he was years before, so the thing that cost Florus a week cost him nothing. He said he was like the purple stripe on the toga, the small bright part that gives the rest its distinction, and asked how the purple could be purple if it agreed to be like everything else. Your decision has been open for a year, and you've been treating that as evidence that it's hard. It isn't hard. You've just never set the terms. 3 moves. Move 1. Write down the actual worst case, not the feeling of it, the sequence. Month 1. What specifically happens? Month 3. Month 6. Seneca made a practice of this. He wrote to a friend after the city of lions burned down in a single night, and his point was not that life is cruel, but that the mind should walk through every contingency in advance so that nothing arrives entirely new. And what you find almost every time you force the vague thing onto paper and give it edges is that the worst case reads as a hard 18 months, and then you're fine. That's the monster. It's survivable. You already suspected it was survivable, and the only reason it stopped you for a year is that you never made it hold still long enough to be looked at. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, but imagination only wins while it's allowed to stay blurry. Move 2. Go and touch it. Seneca's version was to set aside a few days of the coarsest food and the roughest clothes, and then ask himself, is this the thing I was afraid of? Yours is smaller and less romantic. Live 1 month on the reduced number, on purpose, and see what actually breaks. Have one exploratory conversation you feel unready for. Do the small, real, reversible version of the loss. Because a fear you've never made contact with stays exactly as large as your imagination wants it, and one afternoon of contact shrinks it permanently. It's also the only one of the 3 moves that changes what you know, rather than what you think. Move 3. Set the terms in advance with a date in them. Not a resolution, a sentence with a number in it. If I haven't been given the scope by the 30th of November, I start applying in December. The date is the entire mechanism, because a condition without a date is a wish with paperwork. And do it now, while it's abstract and you're calm, rather than in the moment, when your pride and your mortgage will both be in the room. That's what Agrippinus had, that Florus didn't. Not courage in the instant. Terms, set years earlier, so the instant had nothing left to decide. Because here's the last thing, and it's the one that should get you out of the chair. Zeno of Citium was a merchant carrying a cargo of Tyrian purple, the most valuable dye in the ancient world, and the ship went down near Piraeus, and he lost all of it. He drifted into Athens with nothing much to do, wandered into a bookseller's, and started reading. He asked the bookseller where he could find men like the ones in the book. Somebody pointed at a philosopher walking past, and Zeno followed him. Everything the Stoics ever wrote comes downstream of that afternoon, and what he said about it later was this: now that I have suffered shipwreck, I have made a prosperous voyage. The whole of this philosophy, every idea in this episode, exists because a man lost the exact thing you are currently arranging your life around not losing. So here's the rule. Write it down. Name the worst case. Then set a date. This week, 3 things. 1. Write the worst case out in full, with months attached, and read it back. It will be smaller on paper than it is at 3 in the morning. 2. Do one small, real, reversible version of the thing you're afraid of, and find out what it actually costs. 3. Write 1 sentence with a date in it, put it somewhere you'll see it, and tell 1 person so that the date has a witness. You will not be able to make the decision safe. Agrippinus couldn't. The Senate had already voted. Zeno couldn't. The ship went down. What you always control is whether the terms were set before the day arrived. Master that, and you stop paying rent on a decision you were always going to make. If this helped, like it and subscribe. There's a new one every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And do one more thing. Send this to the person who has told you about the same job they're going to apply for 3 separate times. You know exactly who they are. They'll tell you they're just being sensible about it, and then they'll quietly go and check the closing date. The journal's in the description if you want the weekly version. And watch this one next. You're underpaid and you haven't asked,